Hi, I'm Aisha, reporting for WORLDwrite. We're here in Dalston, London today to find out what the public think about the crisis in Ukraine. Have the public swallowed the hype about Russia being evil and the West being the goodies? Let's find out. So, what do you think about the situation in Ukraine?
Actually, by us intervening in those kind of situations, we're putting our views on the world on other countries.
And what do you think about the West's representation of Putin and Russia's interventions in Ukraine?
I feel that he's been demonised, and I feel that perhaps that's slightly unfair, and I would like to see some media coverage that is a bit more, that is less biased actually.
I think there's been a lot of coverage from the view of the West, obviously. It seems a bit one-sided. I find it hard to swallow that the West is calling for a diplomatic and democratic solution when they've supported rioters and activists who have ousted someone who was voted in democratically. It kind of, it's a bit of hypocrisy there, I think.
And what do you think about people like Obama and David Cameron representing our interests and our country's interests in Ukraine and on an international stage?
I don't know if we have interests there, really, that we need to be concerned with. I'd like to hear what the people of Ukraine actually think, what their views and everything is. I don't feel like they have a voice at the moment, so we kind of speak for them.
Well, I've been to Ukraine a couple of times, and I've seen big differences from east and west, the part close to Poland and the part close to Russia. And I think it's a country that together they should do that, because it's a big difference on language. Also, they speak more Ukrainian on the side of Poland, close there on the West Ukraine. They speak really Ukrainian, and they think of the East kind of like Russians, and it's the same country in the end. I think they should solve the problem in the country.
Russia actually probably are feeling very threatened by America, and this is all as a result of what America has been doing, and Russia now are trying to really keep America away from their borders. I've been to Georgia recently, and that was completely changed to when I'd been before, and apparently America have been in there spending money, new airport, new everything in Georgia. Well, why are they spending all this money there? They've got debts in their own country. They need to be sorting themselves out. Why are they having to get close to Russia? So I actually think Russia feel pressurised by them and feel intimidated by America, and they're trying to.
So what do you think about people like David Cameron in the UK and in the EU in particular getting involved in the Ukraine? Because it's not really just the US.
Well, difficult one really. I mean, he's even thinking about coming out of the European Union, so why is he messing around now? But perhaps they need to be left on their own to deal with it, because it sounds to me as if they're not wanting to put up a fight. They're trying to do things peacefully on their own, and perhaps they should be just left to do that.
I think we should just start off what's going on there, because it's none of our business. So I think we should try and face what is wrong with our country. There's a lot of people out there trying to survive, They have the referendum, so they said they want to join Russia, so I think that's cool, innit? So everybody have their own opinion, so
But what do you make of claims that some people are saying that the referendum that was made in Ukraine was illegal, and they weren't actually getting the views of the population, but they were getting Russia's views?
For those people that said it's illegal, I think they have their own agenda in it, because the same thing happened in Kosovo, the same thing happened what country is it? South Sudan. So it's okay for some country to leave some country, and it's not okay for some other country. I think the world is full of double standard, so I think what happened in Ukraine is cool, man. They should join Russia if they don't join Russia, so that's cool.
Yeah, any Western intervention in another part of the world is almost always disastrous. And this one, I think, has a unique, unpleasant flavour. As I understand it, a democratically elected government was deposed by protests, whereas that government should be thrown out by election, of course. Yeah, if I was a Russian in Ukraine now, I would be very worried. There's a very ugly strain of nationalism, which we haven't seen since the collaboration of some Ukrainians with the Nazis because of how they were treated by the Soviet Union, which we haven't seen since the Second World War, which may ban Russian in schools and may threaten them in all kinds of ways, culturally and economically. So what's going on in Crimea, we have to understand in that context.
So what do you think about the America and the EU stating that the referendums that the Ukraine have had so far have been illegal?
Well, who decides what's illegal? So we'd expect that from the Western press and from the Western governments, obviously. That they would say that was illegal. Democracy is a movable feast for our leaders, isn't it? In that it counts until it's inconvenient, and then it becomes something which is, in this case, to call something illegal, under what grounds? I don't think there are any grounds under international law in which it would be illegal.
I think it's really complicated, and I couldn't just say I have one view. I don't like the way it's been portrayed, the way the situation has been portrayed in the media, because I think what often happens is the West just go black and white, so they're good, we're good, they're bad, and I think it's a very sort of simplistic view that's portrayed quite often. What do we hear about Russia? Really quite negative things, don't we? We hear about people being poisoned, we hear about people being shot, killed. So I think I personally wouldn't trust him. I would have a lot of questions to ask about him and what goes on there. But at the same time, I think we only ever hear the bad stuff.
The president was democratically elected in, and everybody, I think, just felt that, Western truth was on their side, and so everything would be all right. And actually, we kind of went against our own principles in that sense, and this is just the fallout from that. And I kind of feel, as dangerous an opinion as it is, that Russia has a point in this, and it does sound like Crimea wasn't it something ridiculous, like 98% of people in Crimea seems to be voting in favour of Russia, intervening in the way they have at the moment. So I think it's a muddy issue, more than maybe we've presented it as.
Well, I think in general the West should keep out, as well as I think Russia should keep out as well. I'm not pro any kind of interventionism. I think the people in Ukraine are sovereign enough in order to decide what they do with their future and with their country. I don't like, because I come also from a place in South America where it was a battlefield between superpowers that is happening now, and I think it's unfair for the people who live there. It's a fight between Russia and the West. It's not a fight of Ukraine.
What do you think motivates superpowers in these instances in deciding foreign policy?
Well, many times it's pretty obvious that they are motivated by economical interests. But it happens like in this situation, I don't see it that much. There is the whole EU thing going on, but also there is a way in which we in the Western have conceptualized that democracy should be, and we're trying to impose that, which is pretty anti-democratic. So it's obviously a moral thing. How democracy is, it's a thing that every country should define. We obviously are, embedded into the Western model, into the American model, European model. But that doesn't mean that democracy couldn't be, lived in other ways, like it's lived now in Russia, let's say.
What is your view on the conflict in Ukraine and the West's reaction towards that?
I don't really know enough, so I can't give you a solid opinion. I just think we just shouldn't have meddled, because I feel like that probably made the situation worse.
If you look at the economic agreement that was made between Ukraine and EU, that was about to be made, it didn't really offer much to Ukraine, and that's why Yanukovych decided to make that deal instead with Russia. But the EU and the media keep, reiterating this fact that, it would be best for Ukraine to ally with the EU. But how would it benefit Ukraine? I mean, we've seen what's happened in Italy and Spain because of austerity measures, and in Greece as well. So I really think that EU has played a major role in the destabilization of the region. We have to keep in mind that Ukraine is not just one monolithic bloc. It's divided. I mean, there are a lot of Russian speakers in Ukraine as well who do want to ally with Russia. So we have to keep in mind, what do these people really want, and leave it up to them.
What do you make of the West's claims that it was illegitimate for Russia to help the Crimea parliament to hold a referendum?
I think the West is just saying that because Crimea has succeeded to Russia. If that wasn't the case, they would have been totally fine with Crimea holding a referendum.
So is it a case of diplomatic double standards?
Well, surely, and we've seen that quite a lot of the time. I mean, if we look at, Western intervention in Syria, for example, or, Iraq, Afghanistan, we've seen, the West being held to holding others to this standard, whereas it itself, plays these double standards and, portrays itself as morally superior.
It seems to me that the reaction of the media in this country has been anti-Russian, and although I am by nature anti-Russian because I'm English, obviously, I'm not anti-Russian in this case, because I think the Russians have a reasonable argument. I think the Russians have mishandled the referendum in Ukraine, or in Crimea, and I'd be worried if I were Ukrainian about the forces massed on the border. But I've always seen it over the years from the other side anyway. And for years the West surrounded the Soviet Union with terrible, terrible weapons. So I think we're getting into a difficult situation, but I've got some sympathy with the Russians. I just think in the case of Crimea, it reminds me a little bit of the United Kingdom sailing right down the Atlantic to save a little place called Falklands, a few islands, because the people there said, we don't want to be Argentinian, we want to be British. And it reminds me a little bit of that all these people in Crimea, the huge majority, want to be Russian. It's pretty obvious whether that poll was rigged or whether that referendum was dodgy or not. It's obvious that the people want to be Russian, and I think they're probably quite happy. I was astonished in the first place when the West so happily accepted the result of the toppling of a legitimately elected government in Ukraine. It may well be that government was totally crooked, and it seemed to me it was run by a kleptocrat, but he was elected, just as Mr. Morsi was in Egypt and Mr. Erdogan was in Turkey. So I don't think it's right for the West, and it's rather strange that the West seems to object when the government is elected that the West, or the majority of the world perhaps, doesn't like. And I think that's what happened in Ukraine. So I think the Crimean situation is more or less settled. I think Putin's won that one.
Do you think that the West, with EU, America and Britain, have blood on their hands due to their involvement in Ukraine?
Blood in their hands is a really strong way of putting it. But as you say, they do need to take some responsibility for the dysfunction that happened there, because they were backing some of the protesters. They've given financial aid, because if you hear some of the speech by Victoria Nuland, she's made comments to the fact that they've spent $5 billion over the past 10 to 15 years building democracy groups in Ukraine, and they've helped financially and politically in facilitating some of the revolt. So, and I think some of the involvement is unnecessary. I think countries should be left alone to sort out their own internal disputes. So I do think they do have some culpability in terms of what's going on.
Do you think then, for example, with the riots in London, if Ukrainian government officials came down to help, encourage protesters, how do you think our governments would react to that?
Yeah, I think the proper comparison would be if Russian, politicians and head of states came in. We would totally not tolerate that at all. Like, evil Russia, what are you doing? Get out, you can't do this. Red Army invading us, all that stuff. That's what people would be saying. We would never, ever tolerate that if Russia did the same thing that we're doing in Ukraine. So I think just another example of Western hypocrisy in terms of what's going on there. So yeah, we will not tolerate it at all.
What do you think about the media perception is that it's kind of, they're portraying Russia and Putin as evil and the West as the good, you know, kind of saviours in a sense? What do you think of that?
Putin's, he's committed some crimes. He's not a good guy at all. I'm not trying to defend him, but he's not evil. There's nothing Putin has done that Western nations haven't done, that America hasn't done in Iraq, in Afghanistan, currently in Yemen right now, with their drone warfare in Pakistan, in Somalia. There's nothing they're doing. And a lot of these drone attacks, they kill more civilians than they kill so-called terrorists. So in terms of that, I mean, I see Putin and I see the West, and I don't see a good guy here. I think that's probably my view. That's the fundamental view. I don't see good guys. I just see two powers fighting for geopolitical influence around the world. That's it to me. I don't see any good guys in this fight.
Do you think that the EU, Obama and Cameron can bring democracy to the Ukraine or anywhere else in the world?
No, definitely not. They did not bring democracy to Libya. They did not bring democracy to Afghanistan. They did not bring democracy to Iraq. They have not. What evidence? They are completely unqualified.
I think it's very easy for a lot of people to say that the UK or America should intervene and get involved in other countries, because a lot of people, I think, are quite naive because they think that other countries are lesser countries or lesser powers. You know, because the USA is a huge power and UK sort of sat on their shoulder alongside that whole power political issue. But I think a lot of people differentiate that of just saying, oh, we should get involved and we should help them out, as if they don't know what they're doing fundamentally. But I think they do, and I think if the shoe was on the other foot, if you will, people would get annoyed if people came over here and, you know, intervened with British politics or Ukraine politics or anything like that, I think.
Okay. And what do you think about when politicians like David Cameron go over to the Ukraine and denounce the referendum's illegal and that Russia's in the wrong, when Hillary Clinton described what was going on in Ukraine as sort of like Russia's being like the Nazis in the 1930s? What do you think about that?
I don't buy into what Hillary Clinton says or does, fundamentally, but I think people need to get to the nitty-gritty. It's easy to make, you know, a sweeping statement like that and try and get a whole country on your side as like Russians are bad, Ukraine's innocent. The statement is easy to make, and it's easy for people to make, it's easy for the media to make, and then everyone goes, oh, the Russians are horrific people and the Ukrainians are poor and terrible and put upon. It's poor form on their part to make sweeping statements like that. They need to give the knowledge to people that, you know, like myself, I'm not massively clued in on the issue, but I know for a fact that it's not as black and white as it's painted to be by politicians. People need to give more of an informed education to people that aren't as clued in.